Great lawyers don't always know how to build great law firms. Let's change that. Join Ben Gideon as he shares hard-won lessons from building his own financially successful law firm and practical insights from top law firm entrepreneurs, business consultants, and more. This is a podcast for lawyers, by lawyers. Welcome to Elevate, Build, and Grow Your Law Firm. Produced and powered by Law Pods.
Today's episode of the Elevate, Build, and Grow Your Law Firm podcast is brought to you by Supio. I just spent an hour doing a webinar with the Supio folks. It was great. We had the head of business development and also one of the lawyers from Texas who's been an early adopter of Supio and walked through some case models of how you use Supio to put a case together. It was very, very impressive. I would encourage everyone who doesn't yet have an AI platform for their law firm, if they're a plaintiff's side, personal injury, medical malpractice type of law firm, check out Supio and get the demo. Our podcast today is also brought to you by VisionSpark. VisionSpark is the company that helps law firms and other businesses find seconds in command. You know any seconds in command, Jeff?
That would be me. It's exactly where I want to be.
When I think of number two, I always think of Jeff.
Thank you, Ben. I appreciate that.
We have VisionSpark to credit for the search process that led us to Jeff, and then Jeff has led us to the holy grail of, it appears, to doubling our revenues in less than a year of your time at our firm. So it's all paid off very well. Anybody who needs a second in command like Jeff, I would encourage you to talk to VisionSpark. Our podcast is also brought to you by 1% for Planet. 1% for Planet, folks, is the organization that allows you to contribute 1% of your gross revenues to environmentally conscious nonprofits. Our firm has done that. It's a great organization that's allowed us to partner with some really terrific nonprofits in Maine and throughout northern New England, and we really would love to have other firms join us in that. And if you do join us in 1%, please reach out to us and we'll give you a plug on the show.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Elevate, Build, and Grow Your Law Firm. I'm Jeff Wright, Chief Operating Officer at Gideon Asen, and as always, joined by owner, partner, Ben Gideon. Good morning, Ben. How are you?
I'm good, Jeff. How are you doing? How was your Thanksgiving?
Thanksgiving was great. First snowstorm in Maine last night, so we all dug out this morning, trying to motivate.
I always like the first snowstorm. It's quite beautiful, but then you remember that you're not going to see the ground again for another 4 months, and that's a little depressing. But no, it's beautiful looking out my window and seeing this ground covered with snow. So
it is. Well, we're excited today to be joined by Alec Broadfoot, CEO of VisionSpark. Welcome, Alec.
It's great to be here. Thanks for having me.
No, it's great to have you, and I'm sure we'll get into it, but I have an affinity for VisionSpark because that was the firm that worked to hire me here at Gideon Asen. So I'm very familiar with the process, and I had the opportunity to do some research, and I kind of watched your origin video of how VisionSpark came about, and I was wondering if you could talk about that. Basically, it looks like you were a terrible hirer back in the day, and you realized that was something that wasn't indicative to you, and you kind of found a niche in the market.
Yeah, I had a mailing and printing company, and we were really good. Like, we were nominated for Ernst & Young Entrepreneurs of the Year. We were profitable. We had some competitors that were going out of business because we were doing things so well. We would pick up our clients' mail. Our biggest client was JP Morgan Chase. We'd pick up their mail like at 2-3 p.m. We'd have it in the post office by 8 or 9 p.m. And we just had a killer operation, but we could not retain anybody, or I should say we were really bad at hiring. We would hire anybody and everybody, and we ended up firing 7 out of 10 employees we hired.
Wow.
And from there, yeah. Go ahead, Ben.
So how did you solve that issue?
So I was at my wit's ends, and I reached out to a mentor of mine who was a real people guy. Like, he understood people and business. And I just said, what am I doing wrong? And he's like, "Are you using any sort of assessments in your hiring process?" I said, "No." So he introduced us to the assessment, the same assessment that we use to this day, the same one that Jeff took. It's been modified, it's a little better, but we started using that assessment in hiring, and our numbers flipped. Instead of firing 7 out of 10 people, we were retaining 7 out of 10 people. And what really drove it down, and this is what I share on, I think what Jeff saw on our website, is that we really needed an executive assistant. We went through like 4 of them in a year. One left to start a family, another joined a cult. I kid you not. And this one woman walked in the interview, and I did not know how to interview back then. Now I do, and I would have definitely not have hired her, but she just was likable and did really well. And I had her take the assessment, and the results were just horrific. It said that she was going to be extremely slow learner. She would need lots of affirmation. She'd be insecure. She'd be a social butterfly. And I'm like, this cannot be true. This is not the person that I interviewed. And so I reached out to her references. Again, I didn't know how to ask good reference questions. And the references are like, "Oh yeah, she's a great employee. We liked her here." I think she actually worked at a law firm prior to coming on board our mailing company. And within a couple of weeks, we fired her. Everything the assessment said about her was absolutely spot on and true. Disorganized and couldn't get work done, and just extremely slow learner, making a lot of mistakes, no attention to detail. And so I said, never again. And so we started using it religiously in our mailing and printing company. And then I was in the peer group with other business owners, and I saw them making the same hiring mistakes I did. You hire someone because they're like you hire someone because you like them, you hire someone because they have a good resume, and they didn't use any science or data or assessments in the process, and they were making really bad mistakes. So I sold my interest in the mailing company, and I started doing consulting to improve clients' cash flow, helping them with increasing profit. And I noticed most of those companies had tremendous people issues, especially when it comes to the leadership position. So in 2012, I started VisionSpark with the passion of helping entrepreneurs hire the right leaders.
And you're located in the Midwest, but work from Maine to California.
Right. Yeah. We're in Columbus, Ohio, and we have clients all over the U.S. We've done a couple in Canada. We've worked with some clients in the U.K. and Australia. But yeah, 99% is across the U.S.
I love that you say, sorry, Ben, it's science and data. We have 5 core values that we really adhere to here, and one of them is make decisions based upon science and data, not fear and ego. And how have you found that the science and data is really the game changer in hiring?
I think it's a game changer because it really cuts through who a person is. Some people are really good at interviewing. Those people tend to be job hoppers or be out of work a lot. So they're good at interviewing, right? And then you have individuals that are really good at selling themselves, individuals that are more extroverted. Those people are good at interviewing, and so they tend to make really good impressions. But when you have actual data that says, okay, this person here is going to be disorganized, now you can ask them questions about their lack of organizational skills. So it really takes, it empowers the interviewer. And there's a good book written by a Harvard professor called It's Not the How or the What, but it's the Who. And in that book, he says a typical interview is a conversation between 2 liars. And so you tend to have that entrepreneur or that hiring manager lying about how great that company is. And then you have the candidate lying about how great they are.
Huh.
So much
And
of
who blinks first?
So much of what you've said rings so true to me in terms of our own trajectory and our learning curve. The day that I located VisionSpark was the day that our then current chief operating officer gave her notice. And I have to say it was one of the darker days of our business so far because it was extremely depressing. We had tried to build kind of a set of systems and internal structures, and it was obviously failing, and we were just kind of like lost as a company and not really sure where to go. And I think I Googled something like, how do you hire a chief, a competent and, high quality chief operating officer? And I found VisionSpark, and I just reached out. And from there, that process, I have to say, I mean, you guys sponsor our podcast. We reached out to do that because we had such a great experience. We wanted to share that with other people, but it was just a remarkably positive experience. And not only did it result in us locating and hiring Jeff, who's been a game changer for our business, it taught us how to hire people. And a lot of the principles we learned in that process, we are now implementing in other hires. Early on, I mean, I just reflecting on what you said, Alec, in terms of your own experience, the first employee we hired after starting our business lasted 3 days. It was a terrible hire. I found her asleep in front of her computer after multiple other problems, and that was kind of the straw, but it was 3 days in. We've had multiple people that have come in and interviewed extremely well, and we were very excited about, who turned out to be exactly the opposite of what they projected or what our impression of them was, and they didn't last. And we just exactly the same kind of curve you were on. We recognized we didn't know anything about hiring, and just didn't, and we've gotten a lot better at it. One of the things that I've noticed, though, about even with that, is that when we go back to hiring again, and I'm thinking now in terms of hiring lawyers, you tend to go back to the mean and forget the lessons you learned again. And why is that? Why do people tend to do the hiring process in the traditional way, even after even after it becomes clear that the traditional approach isn't successful? Is it just because it's harder to do the other thing, or, do you need to have I don't know, like, for example, you used that science and data analysis, which was, I thought, extremely valuable in hiring Jeff, and despite, I think, learning a lot from that process, we've never used that actual data approach again.
Yeah, I think it's because it's easier. It's what we know. It's kind of what's been modeled to us. Maybe it was even taught in business school. But, and I think a lot of it is we tend to want to fall in love with someone's resume. And, I just wrote an article on LinkedIn about this, but 78% of resumes have outright lies on them, and 100% have embellishments. And so, I think we're very trusting. We want to like people. We want to do things fast. You guys are a law firm, and if you made, 50% of your client work had mistakes on it, you guys would be out of business. But when we look at hiring, the odds are against us. Really, about 18% of companies hire the right leaders. So there's about an 82% failure rate. And, for some reason, we all think we're good at hiring. We're good judges of character, and we're not. And it is a process. We've worked with clients and actually helped them build out a hiring process based on their company culture. And so we were working with this company. They were 5 generations. They've been around a long time. And they said that, can you help us hire the right people? And one of the things we noticed is that this company was just very family oriented. They were more introverted. They were humble, and they would be enamored by these people that can interview really well, extroverted, friendly. And then once they come in, they would not fit in the culture. And so we helped them create custom interview questions based on their core values. And we gave them the assessment. We actually gave them benchmarks on the assessment, so they knew when to actually hire someone and when not to. So I think that is a part of why we tend to be lazy in hiring. Is it does take work, but you got to know the cost. 3 to 14 times a person's annual salary should shake anybody in making sure they do it right.
Can you
and
walk
Alec,
folks?
Go ahead, Ben.
I was just going to say, can you walk folks, listeners, through kind of what the overview of the processes so they understand, at the higher level, what you guys do, how
Yeah,
you take it from the beginning to
sure. So,
end?
Jeff is a rock star. So Jeff was one of probably 200 candidates that wanted to work for you, Ben. And we had candidates that read the posting which we created that was really compelling. We call it a magnetic posting, and we had a lot of candidates say, "Man, I want to work for Ben." And because of that, we were able to be the buyer. And so we took them through. We scored their resume, so we wanted to make sure that they had a ticket to the mission. So you don't want to pay too much attention to the resume. You just want to look, hey, are they good enough to fit in? I mean, if they've been a bartender their whole life, we're not gonna bring them in the process. And then we actually do a resume interrogation. So we took the candidates through. We asked them about the resume. We looked for gaps. We wanted to make sure that when they moved on from one company to the other, it was a valid reason. We poked holes in it. If they said, well, I left because it was a mutual decision, we'd say, what do you mean by mutual? Well, I was let go. Okay, that's not mutual. So we did that on a number of candidates. Jeff was a part of that. And then we took him through a manager screener. So these are 8 questions that we know the answers to. So we'll ask questions, and if they answer those questions wrong, if they get them half wrong, they don't move on. And then from there, we took them through a leader.
What type of question are you talking
Yeah,
about
so
there?
here's a question. A manager achieves many things. What accomplishments give you the greatest satisfaction?
And when you say the right answer to that, what do you mean by that?
Yeah. So my interview specialists have a response guide. And so most people say my greatest accomplishment was I took a company from 10 million to 20 million, or I started an operation in Tokyo. Those are all the wrong answers. The right answers are my greatest accomplishment is building teams, seeing others grow, or some really, really good answers are, I think of my colleague, Tom, who used to work for me, and I saw some great potential in him, and I mentored him, and now he's a VP somewhere. I mean, those are the right answers. So there's 8 questions in screening. Then we take it. We go through a leadership interview. It's a 90-minute interview. They get evaluated in 12 areas, what makes a great leader. Our clients tend to choose the individual that has the highest score in this interview. So Jeff did really well. And in each round, we eliminate people. Then we do culture fit interviews, make sure they fit with culture. Then we put them through our assessment. And our assessment that we've been talking about, it actually measures 6 mental aptitudes, including mental acuity, which is super important in a leader, and 10 personality dimensions. So we have indispensable traits that our team is looking for, and we know that a good leader has to have all those traits. So they have to be a strategic learner, they have to be organized, they have to be process oriented, they have to be people oriented, they have to be able to coach and mentor, hold people accountable. And so we're looking for all that. And so, you have a couple hundred candidates. In the end, we narrowed down to 2 or 3. We sent you those 2 or 3 candidates, Ben, and you like Jeff. And then from there, we do some touch points along the way. We help you with the onboarding and making sure Jeff gets set up for success. So we don't just leave high and dry. And we say the interview process doesn't stop once the person's hired. It still continues. And so, so that's our process in a nutshell. There's about 75 steps that I didn't talk about in there, but it's very thorough.
It was ridiculously thorough.
Yeah, I mean, one part of it that I thought was extremely valuable. I mean, many parts were, but the assessment part with the character and personality traits, you had our own leadership team took that, and I think we recognized things about ourselves and our team that we hadn't fully appreciated. And like, for example, one of them was that we scored, my partner and I scored very high on the urgency scale, so that like almost 10 out of 10. So that means you want everything done yesterday, and you realize you can't really work with somebody who doesn't bring a sense of urgency if you have that kind of trait, because you're frustrated all the time that this person just isn't jumping on things, isn't moving quickly. But at the same time, you don't want somebody who is like augmenting your worst traits. So making knee-jerk decisions without, thought and reflexive, consideration. And so Jeff was very high on urgency, but not quite as high as we were. So we thought, that's just one small example, but it's really borne out that way that, we tend to want to make snap decisions, and Jeff can often be that voice of reason, but he's also not bogging things down by dragging his feet either. He's also someone who likes to move things along urgently. But and that's just one example of about 10 different traits that we measured on. And you can see where your real strengths and weaknesses are as a leadership team, where you just, I thought that was extremely valuable.
Yeah, it's important that we know you really well so we can match the right person with you. And again, you said it, Ben, make sure that it's complementary, right? And so part of your culture, because you and your partner do have a high sense of urgency, that is in your culture. And we wouldn't want to bring someone in there that was the complete opposite, that was super patient and procrastinates and, very tolerant of themselves and others, and speed wasn't important in them. So those dimensions on the assessment is really important for us to find a complementary person for you. The number one ingredient for long-term success is not someone's background or education, experience. It is fit. And so that's where we want to get it right every time.
Yeah, and I think to reiterate what Alec was saying about the process, it didn't stop at hiring. Michaela, who I guess was the point person for bringing me on, did follow-ups with me and with Ben and the senior management team for, I want to say, at least 3 months post-hire. And I got the sense from her questions and our conversations, she was almost trying to learn more to make the hiring process better going forward. And so I think it was just mutually beneficial. And we didn't have a lot to talk about because I knew very early on I was where I wanted to be, and I had no concerns to relay to her, but it was just a great follow-up process as well.
One of the things that we learned from it was what did you call that, Alec? The job posting. There's a name you gave for that.
We call it a position profile.
Okay, so that
magnetic. What'd you call a magnetic resume? Or,
it's a magnetic job description or posting, listing. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that the concept is that, like you said, you become the buyer and not the seller of the position, and there's demand for the position because you've written the profile in a way that attracts the right candidates to the job, that they're going to seek you out because they really want what you're quote unquote selling, right? And that was a real game changer for how we started to hire for all of our positions. For example, in our market, finding high quality paralegals is very hard to do because people tend to bounce. The good paralegals find a home and they stay for decades. The people that are less, good, just be charitable about it, tend to bounce around from firm to firm. And those are the people sort of in the market for that job. But what we've found is if you describe the position in a way that doesn't limit it, but extols the virtues of what it is, the culture, the opportunities, you start to get people that don't come from that world that envision themselves in that job. And those are the people we've found, none of whom have had any prior experience as paralegals. They're just very smart people with professional backgrounds, transferable skill sets who buy into the mission and the culture of our firm, and we can train them to do the job. And it's just so much better. It's really game changing. And I was just talking to a colleague at another law firm who's saying his paralegal left and actually got poached by a competitor firm, and they don't have any candidates or ability to fill that position. I said, you're just going about it entirely the wrong way. And we learned that from the process that you showed us, and it's been really successful. Now you guys specialize in hiring leaders, right? Do you think all of the same concepts translate to hiring frontline employees, or are there different considerations that you want to keep in mind?
Yeah, well, absolutely. I mean, you definitely need a hiring process, whether they're, $20 an hour or 100 grand. You definitely need a hiring process. You definitely want to have pre-written interview questions that mirror your company's culture. And you definitely want to use an assessment tool. So we have clients that we've helped with searches, but they love the assessment tool, the talent impact profile, so much that they use on every hire, no matter what the position is. And so what's cool about the tip assessment is that we have benchmarks. We actually have benchmarks for paralegals, for attorneys, for outside sales, for number twos and COOs, for CFOs. So we have several hundred positions where we have the benchmarks. And so our clients can easily see if someone's going to be successful in that role. For example, the paralegals have to have a really good attention and detail. And so that's one of the things that is measured on the assessment. And so that's actually, it's a timed area. Jeff, you may remember that section. But we would want paralegals to score really strong in that area because we know that time is money, and we want someone that has a high level of detail and that can process detail very quickly. And so if someone has to slow down to make sure that things are correct, that's going to cost money. Or if they make mistakes, that's going to cost additional money, because if you have higher level individuals in the firm that are at a higher hourly rate actually double checking the work. And so, that's just one example where an assessment can really help in a law firm.
Need help on a complex personal injury or medical malpractice case? Gideon Asen accepts case referrals and regularly co-counsels with lawyers nationwide on high-value claims. The firm has recovered millions of dollars in cases that competitors turned away because they dig deeper. Ready to learn more? Email bgideon@gideonasenlaw.com to start the conversation. Gideon Asen shares fees as permitted by the laws of each state. Don't let complex cases overwhelm your practice. Elevate justice together with Gideon Asen.
So, Alec, I can guarantee someone listening to this is going to say, and I'm sure you've heard it a couple thousand times, I'm an MBA, I'm a Yale Law School graduate, I can hire myself. Why do I need a third party? I'm smart.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that. I thought that. I had an MBA, and I could run a company and grow it and scale and make it profitable, but the research is against you. That Gallup says 82% of the time companies fail to choose the right leader. Recruiters are successful about 50% of the time, so they're better than what Gallup says. A search firm like us, we're in that 95% success rate. So what's hard, though, and I think this is something that people don't realize, is the cost of a mishire. That is not on the P&L. That is, you don't see that. But there is true cost, right? And so the research says on the low end, it's 3 times the person's salary. So $100K paralegal is that bad hire is going to cost the company $300,000 on the low end, right? And so what does that cost? That's opportunity costs, morale. You have A players leaving, you lose a big client, the senior attorney has to double check the work, you can't bill, all of that. Potential lawsuits, that's all included in that. When you move up the food chain, when you're talking about leaders, Brad Smart, the author of Top Grading, he did a study. And in his study, executives who were mishires cost that company 14 times their annual salary. So this was a while ago, but the average cost of that company was $1.5 million for a mishire, right? And so
And the
I would
truth is,
say,
it's probably higher than that because maybe the opportunity cost, but you've lost the opportunity to hire the right person. So you're
yeah.
going in the backwards direction instead of the frontwards direction.
And I used to talk to visitors groups around the country, and I would share with them the cost, and it would resonate a little bit with them. But when I said a mishire costs your company almost 300 hours of time, that's something that really hit home with them, because like money we can make back, but time we can't.
No, good.
And one thing, when we retained VisionSpark to locate our chief operating officer, there was, I don't know if you still do it, but you had a sort of guarantee that if the person that you located didn't work out within the first year, you would repeat the process at no additional cost. And although you'd much rather have it work out because you lost the opportunity cost and the time of that, and in our case, it did work out. To me, that just demonstrated that you guys, backed up your promise with that commitment, and you took it seriously. And here's a question that probably a lot of small law firm owners would have. There's a cost obviously associated with hiring a firm like yours to do this process. It's a lot more expensive than doing it on your own, and just posting a job on ZipRecruiter or Indeed or something. How do you convince people to? And obviously, part of the answer is the cost of doing it wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
But and it struck me when you were talking that why aren't we having you do all of our? I don't know if you do soup to nuts hiring all positions or if it's just leadership positions, but would it make sense for a firm to have you guys is it cost effective to have you do all the hiring? Because
there's parts of it that we do really well. There are about 8 or 9 positions in an organization that's our niche. So that's all the leadership level positions: CEO, the COO, heads of marketing, sales, accounting, operations, outside salespeople, executive assistants. So we do those really well. We do soup to nuts searches for all those positions. Outside of that, we will help the client with, maybe developing the position profile to attract candidates. Maybe we consult with them on where to post. And then in all cases, we actually do the assessments on the top candidates to help those clients make a decision. So that's where we help everybody. And so I'm really passionate about making sure companies hire right. I think if companies out there that want to do it themselves and they're in the legal industry, to do it right, it takes at least 100 hours. And I would say in most cases, it takes 200 hours of time. So if you think about your billable rate and how you can be spending that money on actually, top line revenue, that's the opportunity cost of doing it internally.
Alec,
and what about hiring lawyers? Because that's been a nut we've had a difficult time cracking. And there's a variety of reasons. One is we're in a relatively small state, low population, small bar. So we always feel like we're the seller, not the buyer in that transaction. We have enormously, great opportunities for lawyers at our firm. The earning potential is extremely high and probably at the very top of our market. The opportunity for, I think, a satisfying career with really great work, intellectually stimulating, great team environment, that's all very high, but it's very hard to communicate that in a way that seems to attract the right people. And then, of course, if somebody is not in our geographic region, they'd have to move here, they'd have to pass the bar here. So there's other kind of restrictive issues that we're dealing with. And then legal recruiters who we've tried, we just find it's sort of a low-hanging fruit situation. They're trying to get the biggest payoff on their end for the least amount of work, and they're just not motivated in a way that tends to produce really great candidates. So we're sort of at a loss as to how to actually go about the process. Do you have any recommendations for law firms that are, hiring lawyers?
I would say number one, invest in your brand. So here in Columbus, our biggest employers are Nationwide, BMW Financial, JB Morgan Chase. They don't have any trouble in getting people to want to work there because they have such a good brand, right? Where a company like VisionSpark or Tony's Pizza, they don't have the local brand to attract candidates. So I would say number one, work on your brand. Always be recruiting. So I would definitely have a job ad out there for your company, really communicate about the culture of your company, what makes you different, and then always be recruiting with those candidates. If you do want to work with a third party recruiter, let them know that you're going to have someone like VisionSpark have the top candidates go through the assessment. And that, I think, will help you find the right recruiter who's very open to a company like VisionSpark helping you evaluate that top candidate. Some recruiters are not. They just want to make that quick transaction, that quick buck. And if they find a great attorney, they're going to shop it around to the law firms that are going to pay the highest commission. So if someone's going to pay 35%, that's where they're going to send that person. If they don't like that person, then they're going to go to the one that pays 30%. So, find a good recruiter. And I would really work on, your branding to make sure you're attracting the right candidates.
Alec, you've mentioned the word culture a number of times, and we talk about culture a lot internally, and we've been fortunate that we've made some extremely good hires of staff over the past year, and we've made it a point to ensure they're a culture fit first and maybe a skill set second, or at least on par with each other. How does VisionSpark go about assessing the culture of who they're hiring for and how that person would fit in from the culture? Because I think culture kind of gets lost in some hiring processes where people are just looking at their skill set.
Yeah. I mean, culture eats strategy for lunch, right? We all heard Peter Drucker say that. Culture is everything. And so the way we did it with Ben's firm is we spent some time with Ben and the team and really understanding the culture. And then we built the profile based on that culture. And because we had the information ahead of time, we had a really good lens. And so, we put on our glasses and say, okay, will this candidate fit with this culture? And so we spent some time really understanding culture, what your core values are, asking what successful individuals that fit well, what they look like. And so it's part of our due process to really understand the culture of a company. Because like I said earlier, fit is the number one ingredient for success.
Mm-hmm. True.
So, Alec, we're coming to the end of our time, but if firms are interested in finding you guys, working with you, how do they get started with that process?
Yeah, number one, our website's visionsparksearch.com, or they can reach out to me on LinkedIn. And we'd be happy to help them make the right hires.
I guess one final thing is, I mean, not all law firms have a Jeff. Not all law firms have a chief operating officer. Do you have interestingly, we've been talking about this process and Jeff on our podcast, and I've had a couple of people reach out to me to specifically ask about this, but I think probably a lot of people have this question. Do you have a sense for at what point in a company's growth or development they should be looking for someone like that?
That's a great question. I don't think there's ever a time where you're too small to have someone oversee your back office operation. So, that may be an executive assistant paralegal when you first start out. Maybe as you grow, it's a full-fledged COO. Maybe it's a business manager. But eventually you want to hire a true COO. We're not a law firm, but my own process, we had about 8 employees before I pulled the trigger to hire my COO number 2. I thought I was too small. I was trying to find a fractional individual, and I vetted them, and I didn't like anybody. And I put them through our assessment. I'm like, I wouldn't have our clients use them. Why would I use them? And a lot of them wanted me to do the work. I'm like, no. I don't need a consultant. I need someone to roll up their sleeves and get things done. So I said, you know what? I can hire someone for what I'm going to be paying these fractional people. And that's where I brought John in. And that was 4.5 years ago. And our company has, tripled in size since then.
That's great.
Well, congratulations. I mean, VisionSpark has obviously done really well. And, you can see now why that's the case. There's certainly a huge need and demand for what you're doing, and we definitely found that to be the case. And it's provided exponential value, and I think it would for anybody who is serious about it, in that process. So appreciate everything you've done for us. Hopefully that will continue, and you may hear from us again soon as this has triggered me to revisit some of these hiring issues that we're constantly dealing with.
Yeah, definitely. We appreciate your time, Alec. Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. Have a good holiday season.
You too.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Elevate, Build and Grow Your Law Firm. Share with colleagues if you found it valuable. Remember, building a successful law firm takes discipline, strategy, and determination. But you're not alone. Produced and powered by Law Pods.